Graveyard Keeper is a dark and twisted take on the cozy gaming genre. Instead of growing crops and taking care of animals, in Graveyard Keeper, we manage a graveyard and desecrate the dead. With the help of our talking skull friend Jerry, we're gonna be embalming corpses for precious meat, occasionally partake in good old witch burning, and maybe even raise an undead or two for the ultimate free labor force. But our end goal isn't just about the graveyard. We're also responsible for delivering sermons for the locals and working to transform our dingy old chapel into a magnificent cathedral. I'm coming into this blind, so get comfy, grab a drink, because today you will be joining me in my first 100 days to determine if this game is actually worth getting into. So without further ado, this is Graveyard Keeper. Surprisingly, the story starts in the modern world. We're a regular guy hurrying home to the love of our life, but while crossing the street on a night of a rainy day, we got into a little bit of an accident. A mysterious dark figure who I assumed to be Death then told us that we have now turned a new chapter in our life, and we are a graveyard keeper. And when I asked if I could get back home, he only said that we need to be a good graveyard keeper if we want to make it back. Death then instructed us to dig up a Jerry who's supposed to help us out in our graveyard keeping journey, and then we awoke in a wooden cabin, confused, with only that one instruction to go off of. And so, this is day 1 of our graveyard keeping journey. A very abrupt start in my opinion, and definitely not the setup I was expecting, but now that we're finally here, let's go dig up Jerry. Stepping outside, I got my first look at this strange new fantasy world. And after taking a quick sniff of the death and decay in the air, I immediately spotted a grave right behind the house where we unearthed Jerry, a talking skull. Now, Jerry is an amnesiac, so he wasn't actually much of a help in understanding where and how we got here, but it seems that he does remember some aspects of graveyard keeping and gave us some guidance on how to become a good keeper. First, he had us interact with a talking donkey, who apparently delivers the corpses to the morgue every single day. It seems that it found a sense of camaraderie between us as we're both currently performing free labor. Jerry then told us to bring the body inside the morgue, and here we are taught the first step in our graveyard keeping journey, performing an autopsy, which in this game basically meant slicing off the flesh, selling it in town, and exchanging it for a beer so Jerry would give us some information on how to get back home. So I got to work with my knife, smoothly sliced off the meat, and once I was done, I unlocked the recipe for various meat dishes. Not even 5 minutes in, and we've already got cannibalism being implied by the game as the main food source. Very nice. We then proceeded to go through the tutorial, making our way to the graveyard, burying the poor bloke, and once that was done, we were rewarded with a burial certificate. And it was then that our boss, the bishop, arrived. The first order of business, according to him, is for me to fix up this messy graveyard and get the quality to at least 5. That didn't sound too bad until I saw we were starting at a quality of -29. Oh boy, this is gonna take a while. However, the bishop did say that once we got the graveyard up to standard, we will be promoted to cleric, so that's something to look forward to. After talking to the big boss, we unlocked a bunch of new technology and got our first look at this game's tech tree, which actually ended up being one of the best parts of this game. It was pretty overwhelming though at this stage, so for now, I just started working on improving the graveyard. I cleared some sticks, used the repair kits to fix up some of the graves, and a couple hours later, it was dark and I was exhausted. There's still a lot of work on before the graveyard is presentable, so for now, I follow this arrow to go home and get some much needed sleep. Except, this wasn't an arrow leading to the house. I had no idea where I was going. It was dark, it was raining, and I contemplated turning back multiple times until I found myself at an inn called the Dead Horse. And it was then that I realized I was in the village, and this is where I was supposed to give the burial certificates in exchange for some much needed income. And even better, I can also sell some of my meat to the innkeeper. Although unfortunately, he said they had an issue in the past with inappropriate meat, which is definitely not what we're trying to sell. But regardless, we needed a royal stamp before we were allowed to sell to him. And that can either be acquired by going through the royal services, which I don't know where that is, or by getting a counterfeit from a man named Snake, who, again, I have no idea where we can find him. So yeah, day 1 ended the same way it began. Confused. It was already the morning of day 2 when we headed outside. We talked to the local blacksmith through the innkeeper's recommendation, and he gave us a sword in exchange for dealing with a local slime problem. But we had to repair the sword first, which I failed at because I didn't sleep the night before. And so I made my way back home and went to bed for some much needed rest. I completely forgot about Jerry's beer. There wasn't much rest to be had that night, as we awoke to a ghost named Yorick. You see, Yorick was complaining about an annoying neighbor, and so he gave us an exhumation permission which he stole when he was still alive, in order to dig up the body and free Yorick from his torment. I also checked out the basement where this ugly goblin man was skulking around, more on him later. And then I tried to bake some bread for a midnight snack, but failed yet again as I couldn't figure out how to pour water out of my bucket. Now at this point, since I was trying to avoid using the wiki, not gonna lie, I started feeling a little overwhelmed. So for day 3 and beyond, I decided to finish up the quest that I currently have, which was dealing with the slimes and negotiating with a local merchant for access to my garden, which didn't end in my favor. I had to pay him rent. After that, I decided to stick to what I know and focus on my graveyard repairs instead. Now, here's the thing with the graveyard. What happened was that because the game gave me wood and stone repair kits during the tutorial, I assumed that those were what I needed in order to get the quality up, which is technically true. But the problem was that in order to craft those, you'd need to go pretty far into the crafting skill tree, which has various bottlenecks that won't be unlocked until I become a cleric. So I spent the next couple of days working on my workshop, mining, crafting, and building various crafters, only to end up with nothing useful in the end. So yeah. I guess the good thing is that I wouldn't have to craft them later on, but man, I was genuinely pretty sad. While I'm in the middle of all of these shenanigans, Jerry went into panic. He said that he saw the Inquisitor around Witch Hill, which is just up the road from my home. Of course, I went to check, and there he was, the Great Inquisitor himself. When he invited me to join in his witch-burning ceremony, I clenched my ass cheeks because, as you know, I've been doing my fair share of questionable activities. We had a small chat with him asking me how I found myself in such an interesting position, and I had to dodge his question for fear of being next in line for the burning. We then watched as the town celebrated murder, and I was then coerced into being his friend and eyes in the village. I promise you, I didn't have a choice. Back in the morgue, I was finally able to give Jerry his beer, and in return, he gave us a bunch of very useful but incomplete information. Apparently, a portal can be opened on Witch Hill, but because of his amnesia, he doesn't remember how. And I'd either have to talk to the astrologer, who only appears at a certain day in the lighthouse, or find a way to get to the church cellar, which I assume can be unlocked once we become a cleric. With those goals in mind, I finally felt that we were once again making some progress. While waiting for the day the astrologer comes to visit, I continue doing what I can in repairing the graveyard. I even dug out the corpse Yorick mentioned and ended their day of being a rowdy neighbor by throwing them in the local river. After the deed was done, Jerry came out of the bushes and said that the river flows into town, so that's probably going to bite us in the ass later on in the game. Lastly, after we helped Yorick, he told us about the sins and good deeds mechanic regarding the bodies that get delivered. Basically, sinful corpses lower the quality of your graveyard, denoted by these skulls right here. Embalming certain organs can add or remove good or bad skulls, and if you don't pay attention to how high the sins are of the bodies you're burying, your graveyard quality will always be in the negative. This would have been helpful to know before I embalmed and butchered all my corpses. And no wonder my graveyard quality is still in the negative. I am getting the hang of it though, and I'm starting to become accustomed to my graveyard keeping duties. But what I didn't know was that my responsibilities were about to extend far beyond the graveyard, involving new duties to the community and access to more permanent assistance. But before we continue, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, GAMIVO.com. As gamers in today's economy, I know that a lot of us are struggling a little bit with the rising prices of literally everything. But thankfully, for games at least, GAMIVO has us covered. GAMIVO has a giant catalog of discounted games for all the major platforms, and most importantly, for you viewers of the channel, you'll get an exclusive 5% discount code if you take advantage through the link down below. Just click the link in the description or the comment section of this video, pick any game you want, and on the checkout page, make sure to type in code Kaganath to get 5% off of your order. You get cheaper games and you also support the channel. Very cool. In addition, if you want exclusive daily or monthly discounts and VIP access to a 24/7 live chat with their support team, go ahead and sign up for GAMIVO Smart. It comes with everything I mentioned plus pre-order priority and a free customer protection program. All of that for only about $1 a month. They're also verified in Trustpilot, having amazing reviews so you know that your purchases are protected. So if you want to get your favorite games at discounted prices and support this channel at the same time, head on over there with the link down below and make sure not to miss out on the 5% discount with code Kaganath. Let's get back to the video. Previously, Jerry advised us to talk to the astrologer regarding the portal. So while we waited for the astrologer to arrive, I thought I'd make as much progress with the graveyard as possible, and that included my morgue. I made a couple of upgrades such as the corpse hatch so bodies could just slide right in instead of being left on the side of the road, and I even finished up the mortuary desk, which allowed me to craft more tables for storage. When the astrologer arrived at the lighthouse, I quickly did my graveyard keeping duty and dealt with the first body that came through my hatch. I embalmed it, buried it, and then ran straight to the beach to progress my quest. Little did I know that I would waste a whole week, as before he'd even speak to me, he wanted a skull, which I could have gotten from the corpse I just buried. Day 17, I was finally able to give the old man his embalmed skull, and he agreed to help us out. He said that back in the day, there was a keeper who was obsessed with the portal. However, one day, he just completely vanished, and nobody could figure out what happened. I figured he probably went into the portal. But before that keeper left, he gave his old friend, the astrologer, a key to unlock a certain door north of the church cellar. And so everything goes back to the church and the graveyard anyway. Before we left though, the astrologer said that we should look for the old keeper's diary once we unlock the cellar door. So I used my newly bought teleport stone, thank you Roderick, and off we went back to my house to continue repairing the graveyard. Day 20. I finally done it. I figured out that if you collect red flowers, combine it with stone and peat, which I just bought from the shepherd in the village, you can make flower beds, which increases graveyard quality by 2 each. And so voila! After all the repairs plus the flower beds, our graveyard quality is now at 7. And all we gotta do is wait for Bishop Day and we'll finally have access to the church cellar. While waiting for the bishop to arrive, I decided to take the downtime as an opportunity to work on general upgrades. I not only upgraded my crafters, but I used those crafters in order to upgrade my tools, which made me more efficient with my resource gathering. The upgraded crafters also allowed me to craft some much needed materials that I used to finally remove the blockages underground, which ended up being a bigger discovery than I expected. So apparently all this time, the morgue, the church cellar, and my home cellar were all connected by a single underground pathway. And it even had a shortcut straight to the village that gave it a sort of Deep Roads vibe. This is really cool and very convenient, as I wouldn't have to surface when cycling through the 3 places. I'm slowly turning into an underground dwelling necromancer, and my only hope is that the Inquisitor doesn't find out. On Bishop Day, I was working on a body after unlocking my Deep Road shortcut, when I noticed that the sun was about to set, and I was about to miss my chance to get promoted to cleric. Not wanting to waste another week, I ran to the church, corpse in my hands, and reported to the bishop that the graveyard is finally up to par. And true to his words, we are finally promoted, not to cleric, but to prior. The church can now finally be accessed, and this is when I realized that the responsibilities of a graveyard keeper extended far beyond the graveyard. Now that we're prior, we're supposed to hold weekly sermons for the people, which would not only reward us with money through donations, but also faith. We'll talk more about that in a bit. After touring the church, we entered this door, and at last, we reached the church cellar. Interacting with the various new crafters I now had access to, I learned that this is where stuff like alchemy and research can be done. But so far, the only known use I have for it is the Inquisitor's quest from the witch burning, so we'll hold off on messing around here until we know what we're dealing with. Upon clearing this last blockage, I talked to the goblin man I was dissing earlier in the video, which ended up actually being Snake, who held not only the keys to selling my questionable meat, flashbacks to the royal stamp, but more importantly, he's also the key to opening this gate that will lead me to the Keeper's diary. I needed faith to convince him though, so yeah, we have to hold our first sermon. In the meanwhile, I started working on some side quests. I dealt with a vampire problem where I was accused and forced to eat garlic. I helped out my donkey who went on a work strike and demanded payment by carrots. And then I accidentally spun around and activated one of the DLCs, which I wasn't planning on doing yet, so Yorick will now be guarding the morgue for the rest of the playthrough. On day 31, I held my first preaching session at the brand new church and failed spectacularly. However, we did make a couple of coppers and earn some faith, so that's at least some progress towards being able to convince Snake to help. But it wasn't until day 37 when we had our first successful sermon, gaining money, but more importantly, the faith needed to convince Snake. We are now ready to open the gate in the church's cellar. With the 5 faiths that we accumulated from the sermons, Snake agreed to pass on his instructions, which combined with my keeper's key, turned it into an active key and unlocked the gate. Now, as bro was yapping away about his sad backstory, I went straight to my goal, the keeper's diary, only to accidentally step on an exploding heat vent, which burned our face and we died. Our first death in Graveyard Keeper. Or was it the second? Thankfully, apparently we are immortal, which is really cool and very convenient as commented on by our friend Snake. He has his own thing here, but we'll get back to it later. Continuing our exploration, we found Gunter the masochistic zombie. He's an undead resurrected by one of the previous keepers as help, and so here we are introduced to the concept of undead helpers. With zombie juice, a healthy corpse, and some faith, we'll be able to resurrect the bodies that come into the morgue and have those zombies work for us. Pretty freaking insane. We picked up the diary before we left and passed it on over to the astrologer who was able to reveal the truth about the portal. So, the witch portal project we needed to complete in order to go home to the love of our life is a pain in the ass. It's a long, arduous journey of crafting an item I had no idea about, with 3 items I don't know where to get, and needing to get access to the town, which I also had no clue how to do. But honestly, we're adapting to the role of a graveyard keeper pretty well. And of course, we want to go back home, but at this point, I feel like there's been a drastic shift. The confusion we had on day 1 is gone. We're not trying to survive in this new world anymore, but instead, we're looking to make it work for us. Literally, the age of automation is about to begin. So here's where we are. We're at the edge of a massive shift regarding our progression in Graveyard Keeper. Of course, part of that is making more zombies, but at the same time, after we were promoted to prior, the bishop told us that the next step is to upgrade our old chapel into a proper big church, which would bring in more people, resulting in higher donations and stronger faith gain. And faith is what we need for the massive zombie army. For now, since we can only accommodate a small amount of worshippers, our faith gain is pretty limited. But if we could get stronger, better prayers, we can actually increase our gains regardless of how many people are in attendance. So how do we get better prayers, you ask? Well, we needed to do some studying. And if we want to make more zombies, we're also going to need to do a lot of alchemy because we need a continuous supply of the so-called zombie juice. Aside from those, other requirements for the church upgrades are a score of 30 for a graveyard quality, a score of 20 for church quality, and some fish fillets because I guess the bishop's a little hungry. Now, luckily, since we've been diligently taking care of our graveyard, keeping it clean, adding gravestones, and throwing away high-sin corpses, we actually already completed the first requirement for the church upgrade. However, we also still need to upgrade the quality of the church itself, so from day 44 onwards, I put most of my efforts on trying to make the church look better. Once I had a free day, I even took the opportunity to step foot into the dungeon for the first time, but honestly, I bit off more than I can chew and ended up almost dying, thankfully making it just in time for my weekly sermon. After utilizing some of my faith to study, aka unlocking blue skill points, I finally had enough to be able to make a resurrection table. So after placing that in the morgue, I ran outside, went north of the church where Gunter told us his zombie brother was supposed to be in, dug him out, put him on the resurrection table, and nothing happened. I put him on the autopsy table, moved some organs around, and still, my zombie wouldn't move. I spent the next few days trying to figure out how to revive this dude when I had a brilliant idea to put him on a crafter. And lo and behold, I have the first member of my zombie army. I created a brand new sawmill just for him right next to this giant tree north of the church, and theoretically, the zombie should now infinitely cut wood in this area, so that's one part of our automation finally up and running. On day 53, we hit a massive roadblock. I know I needed the zombie juice to craft more of these guys, but I actually haven't even unlocked alchemy yet in my tech tree. Not only that, but in order for me to make better prayers to earn more faith, I also needed pen and ink, which cost a whopping 2.5 silver coins if bought from the astrologer. Hell no. I needed to figure out how to alchemize that, or else I'm gonna go broke. So I decided that I'm going to explore the whole map and unlock everything I missed, which was the perfect plan because near the river, despite me throwing all my excess supplies here, I totally forgot that there was actually a stone bridge that can be repaired, leading to a completely unexplored area of the map. So that was my next project. The next few days were spent crafting and repairing the bridge, and on day 59, it's finally up and ready. I circled around the area, first following the road, which ended up at a dead end with another blockage, but in the center is a giant swampland that was very hard to navigate. But since I had the teleport stone anyway, I pushed through. As the night got darker and fog rolled in, visibility dropped lower and lower, and I found myself stuck in the middle of the swamp. Now, luckily, there was a hut here, with a woman standing just outside. Talking to her, we discovered that she is in fact an amnesiac witch. What is it with the people of this world in amnesia? So the witch told us about a potion that would restore her memory, and my heart sank. I thought we were in for another huge multi-step quest, but then I checked my inventory and realized I had the exact potion she was looking for. A health potion that I got from when I first visited the dungeon and almost died. I gave it to Clotho, restored her memory, and guess what? We unlocked the alchemy skill tree. I almost gave Clotho a kiss. The next weeks were a blur spent in academic confusion. Because with alchemy, it wasn't just about making the potions themselves. You actually had to create and gather the stuff you needed to make the potions with, such as collecting the ingredients, making glassware, and setting up all the necessary crafters in order to get those done. Which I did. Took me a while. Next, I needed black paint for ink. So I continued exploring. Removed the blockage north of the swamp, which was the only area I've yet to explore at this point, and it's here where we found a huge stone and marble quarry as well as a mine. This was a potential zombie mining facility, which is a huge find if only we had more zombies to put to work. But at least we found some coal veins, which if turned into graphite through the furnace, can be used for making black paint. I thought, great, until I progressed through the crafting and realized that I'm heavily bottlenecked once again by blue skill points. At this point, I was starting to give up. I was thinking that I might just buy the overpriced pen and ink from the astrologer, but while working on a dead body like I usually do, I ended up butchering it so badly that this dude ended up with not one, but 2 surgical mistakes and 0 positive skulls. As I was contemplating throwing this body in the river, I thought, you know what? This might be the perfect time to try cremation. So I cleaned up the area below my morgue, set up the wood, then placed the body on top before lighting it on fire. As the flames burned, I took the time to think about what my next steps should be. But when the fire died down, check out what we got. With the ink now craftable, all of our goals are only a matter of time. We can finish up quests, write prayers, and we've got the foundation for whatever potion I want to create, not just ink for writing. I finished up the alchemy room, and with it, I crafted stronger prayers. And since we've now got an infinite source of ink from cremated ashes as well as papers from skin, I'll be able to craft even stronger prayers week by week as long as we can gather enough faith. With the materials left over, I completed the mining base for my future zombies, and with the remaining pen and ink, I even submitted the flyers that the Inquisitor was asking for way back when we first met him. We're finally able to progress the Inquisitor's quest. After a quick chat by the fire, which is being fueled by yet another witch, he rewarded us with access to the western side of the graveyard, essentially expanding our territory. Another step towards improving the church. With alchemy up and running and the graveyard fully unlocked, we are now in a great position to go for the home stretch. So without further ado, let's get our hands dirty with a little bit of necromancy. We're finally at the final push to day 100. But before anything else, the first thing I did was of course to try out my new prayers that I worked so hard on, which ended up being a great success. From this point on, it'll help us progress faster with the higher faith gain. So just to lay it out, there's a couple of things we're looking to do at this stage of the game. One is to craft the zombie juice and resurrect a second zombie. and 2 is to finally upgrade the church. In order to do that though, we needed to accomplish a couple of things such as increasing the quality of both the graveyard and the church, as well as getting the bishop his order of fish fillet. In the previous chapter, I already completed the graveyard part, and I also worked on increasing the church quality by adding candles. The only thing left really is to get fish fillet, so now I finally had an excuse to do a quest I've been ignoring for the past 70 days or so: fishing. First, we needed a rod, which was offered by the lighthouse keeper in exchange for some moths. Moths only came out at nighttime, but aside from that, they're pretty easy to gather. We turned those moths into bait, gave him to the lighthouse keeper, and finally started spending the next couple of days trying out various fishing locations to figure out which fishes I can use for the bishop's order. Meanwhile, while all of this was happening, I was also crafting the necessary materials for the last piece of my zombie juice puzzle, the alchemy mill. By utilizing the mill to grind crop waste from the carrots I've been paying the donkey, I made health powder, combining that with blood and a fresh corpse, and here we go. The second zombie awakens. The potential now is limitless. I had an infinite source of zombie juice because I invested so much in my alchemy system, and pretty much the only resource that we're waiting on is faith, which can only be acquired on sermon day. But regardless, at this point, the zombie army is inevitable. I put my new zombie to the logging site so Gunter's brother would finally have a companion, and as they worked tirelessly day and night, I worked to complete the last of my church upgrade requirements. Day 91, Sermon Day. I gave the bishop his fish fillet, and he revealed one last objective before we could proceed with the upgrade. He said that we needed a building permission from the royal services, which cost a whopping 20 silver coins. Bruh. I was pretty much broke. But if I was gonna make money in this game, there was only one way I knew how. Graveyard keeping was second nature to me at this point. All this time, throughout all the challenges that we've done, I've never neglected my graveyard keeping duties, and so the next few days went by in a blink of an eye. Take the body from the morgue, perform an autopsy. If I don't butcher the corpse, it goes to the graveyard. If I messed it up, the body gets cremated and I get more alchemy crafting materials. After bodies upon bodies upon bodies, my burial certificates kept piling up, and more than 20 silver ended up in my pocket by the time the bishop visited again. I bought the building permission, gave it to the bishop, and at last we finally witnessed our dingy old chapel transform into a proper big church. Absolutely beautiful. Talking to the bishop after the event, we discussed the next goal of the journey. With a target of 50 church quality and 200 graveyard quality, that next step is to turn this church into a towering cathedral, which is insane to even think about. That's probably gonna take us another 100 days or so. But before I went to bed that night, I made sure to pick up my town pass, and on day 99, I decided to check out the town where the materials for the portal should be located. And damn it. Of course, it wasn't going to be that easy. Jerry told us that an ancient, raging power is preventing us from entering town, and that we needed to talk to Snake if we wanted to get the items we needed for the portal. Day 100. I spent my last night, for now, in the Dead Horse Inn, drinking with my buddy Roderick, the first person I ever spoke to in the village. And on that evening walk home, I am reminded by our first night in this strange and dark world, a fitting end to our 100 days journey. As for impressions of the game, let's do a little bit of pros and cons. Pros. I love the interconnected nature of the quests, the crafting, and the resource management of this game. Despite the game's complexity, and even during the times when I felt that I was bottlenecked in my progression, there was always a path available that eventually led me to unlocking whatever it was that I needed at the time. Sure, it was confusing, but not to the point where it was unfun. Number 2. Zombie automation. I honestly had no idea this was even in the game, but this is such a huge quality of life feature that aligns perfectly with the setting. It added that extra layer of depth and humor, not to mention a massive goal for me to look forward to during the early hours. Lastly, I just loved everything about the theme, the dialogue, and the story of Graveyard Keeper. It's such a refreshing twist on the cozy gaming genre that I now find myself looking for similar titles that challenge common notions of what a cozy game should look like. And again, it's hella funny. Cons. This is ironic because the reason for this is in one of the features I put on pros. Con number 1, I did have to use the wiki a couple of times. This is a very wiki-reliant game, and as you saw, I tried to avoid using it for as long as possible, which is why I still believe that the flow of the game is amazing. But then there's like really basic stuff that I feel should have at least had a tutorial prompt, like for example, how to use a zombie. I didn't need to spend a whole week trying to figure out how to get that guy to move. Just a little pop-up window would have been an amazing help already. That's really the only negative I have for this game so far. Features that I've yet to explore, which I'm saving for my 100% completion review, are the DLCs, which are massive in this game. Apparently, each have their own storylines. You can build up a refugee camp, run your own tavern, and even work with souls of the dead, which sounds absolutely amazing. But for now, thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, please feel free to join either the Patreon or the YouTube membership for exclusive contents, shoutouts at the end of the video, and early access to every single one I make. Otherwise, a simple like and subscribe are more than enough to help. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.